Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 3, Chapter 23, titled Devahuti's Lamentation, text number 49. Patimsa prajish. One second. Pravrajishyantam. I just need to get the words right. One second. Pravrajishyantam. Patimsa pravrajishyantam. Tada lakshyo satibahi. Smayamana viklavena. Hridayena viduyata. Patimsa pravrajishyantam. Tada lakshyo satibahi. Smayamana viklavena. Hridayena viduyata. Patimsa pravrajishyantam. Tada lakshyo satibahi. Smayamana viklavena. Hridayena viduyata. Patimsa pravrajishyantam. Tada lakshyo satibahi. Smayamana viklavena. Hridayena viduyata. Tada lakshyo satibahi. Smayamana viklavena. Mataji's. Smayamana viklavena. Hridayena viduyata. Word for word. Patim, her husband. She. Pravrajishyantam, going to leave home. Tada, then. Alakshya, after seeing. Usati, beautiful. Bahihi, outwardly. Smayamana, smiling. Viklavena, agitated. Hridayena, with a heart. Viduyata, being distressed. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Chanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. When she saw her husband about to leave home, she smiled externally, but at heart she was agitated and distressed. Purport. Kardama Muni finished his household affairs quickly by his mystic power. The building of the castle in the air, traveling all over the universe with his wife in the company of beautiful girls, and begetting of children were finished, and now, according to his promise, to leave home for his real concern of spiritual realization. After impregnating his wife, he was about to go away. Seeing her husband about to leave, Devahuti was very disturbed, but to satisfy her husband, she was smiling. The example of Kadama Muni should be understood very clearly. A person whose main concern is Krishna consciousness, even if he is entrapped in household life, should always be ready to leave household enticement as soon as possible. Translation again. When she saw her husband about to leave home, she smiled externally, but at heart she was agitated and distressed. Om Jnanatimurandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadhati Swapadhantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patita Nam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukham karoti vachalam bhangam langayate girim Yat kripa tamaham vande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hare Krishna. Okay, so we're continuing with Srimad Bhagavatam. This is after Kadama Muni and Devahuti created a wonderful situation in which they can procreate, and after procreating, Kadama Muni is sticking to his promise that he made to Swayambhuv Manu in the beginning. And what was that promise? If we go back to the chapter, the marriage of Kadama Muni and Devahuti, then you can see here in text number 19, Kadama Muni says, therefore, to Swayambhuv Manu, just before he accepts Devahuti's wife as his wife, therefore I shall accept this chaste girl as my wife, on the condition that after she bears semen from my body, I shall accept a life of devotional service accepted by the most perfect human beings. That process was described by Lord Vishnu. It is free from envy. So one thing you have to keep in mind is that it's not that household life or family life is outside the realm of devotional service. Here, Kadama Muni is making the point that he's going to accept the service accepted by the most perfect human beings, the Paramahamsas, Paramahamsa Mukhyan, which means that he will travel and absorb himself in the mind, in his mind, absorb himself in Krishna consciousness. So it's not that because he was in household life he wasn't able to perform this. Rather, he performed these household duties in Krishna consciousness, and then as a Paramahamsa he performed the duties of a Paramahamsa in Krishna consciousness. So the same thing here, the point being mentioned by Srila Prabhupada in text 49, is that Kadama Muni understood clearly that he should be always ready to leave household enticement as soon as possible. So you can understand here that all these varnas and ashramas, they are all guidelines, or you can say like scaffolding. They're all meant to give us a structure in our life so that we can practice Viti Bhakti or Vairi Bhakti. Because we are unfortunately in a very contaminated state of consciousness, which means that although we are servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we are servants of Krishna, we have somehow or other come to a position where we now think that we are the enjoyer. We think we are capable of competing with Krishna. In fact, we think we are so capable that we can defeat Krishna in our enjoyment. This is our contaminated consciousness. Because the original consciousness is that Krishna is the Pati, Krishna is the original Purusha, the original enjoyer, and we are all meant to be enjoyed. We are the Prakriti. So in that very contaminated or very polluted consciousness, due to a poor fund of knowledge and the effects of Maya, Maya covers us, avaranatmika, and prakshamatmika. She drags us down to the lowest forms of life. So not only she covers us to make us forget our original identity, but she makes us think that we are the body. That I am a pig, I am a hog, I am a dog, I'm American, I'm Indian, I'm human, I'm demigod. All of these designations Maya drags us into and makes us think we are like that. That is what's known as polluted consciousness. Because then we identify with the body and the soul, or rather body and the mind, rather than the soul. So, Krishna, Jiva Surupa Krishna Nitya Das. That our Surupa, our original identity is servants of Krishna, Krishna Das. But being polluted, we're unable to understand that. We have forgotten our relationship with Krishna. This is the difficulty. So how to remember? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mentions in Chaitanya Charitamrita that Krishna consciousness is not some artificial external artificial sort of acceptance or some sort of injection or electric shock that one must receive. Rather, Krishna consciousness is dormant within the heart. That he says to Sanatana Goswami, that verse is on the tip of the tongue. No, not that verse. Krishna, it's not coming. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's mentioned there that the Shravanadi Suddha Chitte Kare Udhoy, that the soul is eternally servant of Krishna. So the love of Godhead is dormant within the heart. How to revive, how to invoke, how to bring about this Krishna consciousness? Shravanadi Suddha Chitte Kare Udhoy. Udhoy means like the rising of the sun, to bring about. How does it come about? Shravanadi Suddha Chitte Kare Udhoy. By chanting Shravanad and hearing Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte. Because without hearing, the chitta, the consciousness, will not be cleansed. Like we sing every morning in the Shikshashtakam. What is the verse? Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Cheta, the heart. Cheta Dharpana Marjanam. We need to clean the mirror of the heart. Because what we see in the mirror is simply dust. Caked, they say. Layers and layers of dust. And when we see that, our vision is distorted. Like that, when we see ourselves in the mirror every morning, we think we are this body. We think we are this mind. So by Shravanadi Shuddha Chitta, by chanting and hearing the names of Krishna, then naturally our consciousness becomes purified. Then Kare Udhoy, the love of Godhead naturally, the dormant love, Prabhupada says, dormant love of Godhead becomes awakened. Right? The example Prabhupada gives, I like in Nectar of Devotion, is that you see a child. The child can walk, but it requires some training to be able to invoke that ability to walk. It's not that it needed to be given the ability to walk. It already knows the need to walk, but it needs to be trained so that it can walk without falling. In the same way, devotion is within the heart, but we need to train it in such a way that is pleasing for Krishna. They say the path to hell is paved with good intentions. Right? So what does that mean? Because if you do good intentions, doesn't that mean you go to heaven? Rather, what we think as good intentions may not be absolute. In other words, what we may think as good for one person may be bad for the other. So our intentions may be good, but in what relation do they have to Krishna? That is what we need to see. Because that Shravanadi Shuddha Chitta, that comes by hearing from the spiritual master. If we hear carefully from the spiritual master, we'll know what Krishna wants. By knowing what Krishna wants, what we need to do to recover our consciousness, gradually, of course this gradually is dependent upon our surrender. But by gradually performing devotional service, we'll develop, or rather reawaken, the love of Godhead within our heart. And how is that done? Through the Vedic system. For those who are unable to take to devotional service directly, Krishna gives the Varnashram Dharma. You've heard of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, then Bhakti Yoga. Karma Kanda, Upasana Kanda. Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, Upasana Kanda. Srila Narottama Das Thakur explains that Karma Kanda, Jnana Kanda, Kevala Vishera Bhanda. That if you're attached to Karma Kanda, not Karma Yoga, Karma Kanda, that is just simply attached to performing activities for good results and performing atonement to get rid of bad results, and performing jnana for the sake of just understanding the Supreme and merging into Him, that is equivalent to drinking poison. Kevalera Vishera Bhanda. It is simply drinking poison. So what do we need to do? We need to do Upasana Kanda or Bhakti Yoga. But because of the conditioned living entities' variegated levels of conditioning, Krishna has established a system so that one can gradually come to the platform of devotional service, or one will gradually perform devotional service and become purified. This is the genius of Lord Krishna. Because we think that you need to go to a particular step to perform a particular activity, right? You need to be qualified to perform something. To be qualified to perform karma yoga, you need to have a guru, you need to perform sacrificial activities, you need to know what to get, you need to have the resources. To perform jnana yoga, you need to be qualified. Yama, niyama, asana, you need to know all of these things. But with bhakti, there's no prerequisites. And this is the mercy of Lord Krishna. So what happens is that when one performs karma kanda in relationship with Krishna, in other words, they'll perform their activities or their duties, but offer the results to Gopinath, that's devotional service, karma yoga, because it's karma linked to Krishna yoga. Same thing with jnana yoga, ashtanga yoga. Everything is in relationship with Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Same thing with Varnashram Dharma. Varnashram Dharma is within the realm of karma yoga, because one performs one's varna, occupational duties, and ashrama, one's social status, in relationship with Krishna. Varnashrama Dharma. Now, when you perform your varnashrama, when you perform your varna, which is your occupation, and stay within your ashrama, everything becomes nicely fixed in Krishna consciousness. You become sheltered and you're able to perform regulated devotional service to the Lord. In other words, you'll be able to gradually purify yourself without being too much agitated by the external atmosphere. Of course, now we see in Kali Yuga, extremely difficult to establish the Vedic culture of Varnashram Dharma, as it was. It is possible, but it requires a lot of effort. So what do we do in the interim period? It's very simple. We perform all our duties in relationship to Radha Gopinath. We chant Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and simply carry out the orders of the spiritual master. That is sufficient. You don't need to do or concoct anything more. So if we do this, then we'll be able to be free from the entrapment of Maya, not just household life, not to become just a Grihamedi. There's a trap in each of the ashramas. You can be a brahmachari, but you can be a lazy, vegetable brahmachari. You can be a householder, but you can be attached simply to the enjoyments and the concessions of household life. You can be a vanaprashta, or you can be a lazy bum on the street. And you can be a sannyasi, but you can simply be enjoying within your mind. So there's pitfalls and difficulties in each of the ashramas. So the point here is to be made is that the main concern is Krishna consciousness. Even if he's entrapped in household life, one should always be ready to leave household enticement as soon as possible. In other words, if we apply it to Krishna consciousness on the best degree or the best level of devotional service, we should be ready to give up everything for Krishna's service. And that is exemplified by the gopis of Sri Vrindavan Dham, because they gave up everything for Lord Krishna's pleasure. We can't imagine or understand the social duties that the gopis had accepted. We can't understand the duties and responsibilities that they had and how they were obligated to follow them. But they gave up everything simply for the pleasure of Lord Krishna. Of course, speaking of the Rasa Leela is beyond my realization, but at least we can understand that in the beginning, that these gopis had given up everything for Krishna's pleasure. They're not just simply some lusty girls, that ordinary lusty girls looking for a paramour. Rather, they're the topmost devotees of Lord Krishna. Sometimes the example is given just to pacify or to clarify within the minds of the impersonalists and the karmis or the materialists, that you have to understand that some of the gopis were sages in their previous lives. So that example is given, that they had gone to Ramachandra in the previous yuga in Dandakaranya forest and asked him that, please, we would like to be in your association. But Ramachandra knew that this is not going to work in this Leela. So therefore he said, you will take birth in the next yuga as my associates, and I will be able to satisfy your desires in that way. So they're not, and then we have, of course, the Vedas, the personified Vedas. If you read the 90th or the 89th chapter of the Krishna book or the 10th canto, there the Vedas, they wake up Mahavishnu at the time of creation by chanting these wonderful prayers. And it's mentioned that at the end, those personified Vedas then take birth as the gopis of Vrindavan. So they're the Shruticharis, and the Munis are known as the Municharis. So if they are taking birth of the gopis, what about the Nitya Siddha gopis? How exalted they are, right? And then you can take it from another angle. Prabhupada gives you another understanding, that if the yogis and all of these great personalities are giving up everything, material, all types of material enjoyment, mental, physical, and they are taking shelter of Krishna, and Krishna is performing Rasa Leela, Krishna must be beyond the material nature, because they're taking shelter of him to cross over material existence. So when Krishna performs such activities with these beloved gopis, it's beyond all mundane material consideration. It is the exchange of rasa in the transcendental realm that is completely beyond the purview of all conditioned souls. So this is Krishna's gopis, that they also performed their varna and ashrama, but they gave it up for Krishna's pleasure. This is the point. It's not that, they whimsically gave it up. They followed 100%, completely. But when the point came that Krishna wanted something and varna and ashrama was an obstacle to it, they gave it up. This is the purity in the devotional service of Krishna's gopis. So you see, like for example, there's the story of Narad Muni. We'll go down to our level now, from the Rasa Leela back down to our level. Say the example of Narada Muni going around. Krishna in Dwarka, Krishna says, I have a headache. And Krishna and our Narad Muni says, so what should I do? Krishna says, I need the dust of my devotees' feet on my head. That way I'll be able to overcome this headache. So then what does Narad Muni do? He travels throughout the whole universe asking devotees, please give your dust. And each one of them is going, are you crazy? How can I give the dust? First of all, who is Krishna? And who are we? We are so insignificant. And what kind of offense is it to give the dust of our lotus feet, lotus of head. They would say our lotus feet. A dust of our feet on his head. So Narad Muni then was confused. And he went to the gopis of Vrindavan. He went back to Krishna, and Krishna says, go to the gopis. So he was thinking, gopis? Okay, let's go back to the gopis. So then he went to the gopis, and the gopis said, how are you, Narad Muni? How is our Lord Krishna in Dwarka? My dear gopis, your Gopinath has a headache, and he wants the dust of your lotus feet. So understand this point. According to the rigid, or the, not rigid, but the structure of the Varnashram Dharma, the gopis are females. The gopis are Vaishyas in one sense. So their position according to the hierarchy, if you want to go in that sort of perspective, and Krishna is a king. Now let's take it a different level. The gopis are devotees of the Lord, and the Lord is the Supreme Master. So we'll transcend that. How could they give the dust to Krishna? Did they give the dust to Krishna? Yes, without any consideration. In fact, they gave so much to Narad Muni, they said, if you want, you come back for more. Because what was their mood? Their mood was Gopinath's pleasure. Whatever may happen to me, let it happen, but Gopinath's pleasure is more important. So this is the mood of a devotee. And this we must inculcate now. We must start now. It's not that, later on, when I become Paramahamsa, then it'll work out. When I go back to Godhead, that's when I'll start learning all of these things. No, it needs to be inculcated or cultivated now. Cultivated is the word Prabhupada uses in Nectar of Devotion. Bhakti Yoga is cultivated. What is the verse? Anya bilashita sunyam karma jnanadi. Karma jnana. Anakulyena Krishna Anushīlanam. We're all slow today. We need to wake up. So here, Krishna, one of the points being mentioned here by Rupa Goswami is that it should be free from karma and jnana and all of the other lower forms. But mainly it should be cultivated, which means it's an ongoing dynamic process. It's not something that bang, you get the mantra, that's it, finished, done. Sometimes we hear of how pure devotees, they simply took the mantra and they went straight to the platform of pure devotional service. Prabhupada says when you see that, you should understand that they have performed devotional service before and it's been cultivated. It wasn't just simply, like for example, when you see Jada Bharat, the Bhagavatam gives the whole explanation of where he began from as Bharat Maharaj. So that cultivation was there. When you talk about someone like Ajamil, the Acharyas explained that Ajamil had performed a devotional service to come to the platform of when he performed or just said Narayana without any, of course he had motive, but it was because of some innocence, some sincerity, he was able to attain Vaikuntha Loka very quickly. So there's cultivation required, and that cultivation requires discrimination and intelligence. It means that every moment of our life we need to make the right decision to choose Krishna. Krishna consciousness is so simple. It's not that you need to know what to do, how should I situate myself in this. No, at every single moment, what will please Krishna? That's it. That's all we need to learn. But because we are not on that spontaneous level, we're not so pure to be able to hear, because you see, so many lifetimes we spent here. And Krishna is speaking as the Paramatma within the heart. Do this, don't do that, and we're not listening. We've ignored him. So therefore he comes as the external representation, which is the spiritual master. Antaryami comes externally as a spiritual master. The representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is our spiritual master. By hearing the spiritual master, gradually we become purified. So that's the goal. So we need to perform devotional service very, very tivrena bhakti yogena. Akama sarva kamava moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajita purusha param. So regardless of what situation we are in life, we're completely attached, hopelessly attached to material existence. You know what hopelessly attached means? That you'll think, no, I won't do it. And then by the time you sleep at night, you go, I did it. Hopelessly attached. Sarva kama. Akama means one who's completely free from all of these attachments. Akama sarva kama va moksha kama. One who's fed up with material existence. I don't want anything to do with it. I just want to be liberated. Forget about happiness, forget about distress. I don't want anything to do with this duality. Moksha kama. Udharadi. Interesting. One who is broad-minded. Tivrena bhakti yogena. They will perform devotional service very intensely, like the rays of the sun. When like a laser, when you get the rays of the sun through a magnifying glass, you pull it together and you push it through, and it's able to burn grass, right? It acts as fire, as such a strong property. So our devotional service should be like that. And the correlating verses in Bhagavad Gita is Vavasayatmika buddhi eke ha kurunandana bahusaka sinas anantascha buddhayo avavasayanam. Remember how I was saying you need intelligence, discrimination to perform devotional service? It needs to be tivrena, laser-like. That's only possible if one is free from bhoga, shaya, and bhoga and aishwarya. Bhoga means material enjoyment, aishwarya means opulence of this material world. When one is free from these two things, bhoga, shaya, if one is not free from these things, bhoga, shaya, prasaktanam, taya parhita chetasam, vavasayatmika buddhi samadhavana vidiyate. This tivrena bhakti yogena and this Vavasayatmika Buddhi are same. The same thing. Vavasayatmika Buddhi means unwavering, focused performance. or intelligence. And Tivrena Bhakti Yoga means, again, laser-like, very, very focused devotional service. And how is this? Why should this be performed? If you do this, then very easily you'll attain Krishna's lotus feet. It's very quick. It means you'll take shelter of Gopinath very quickly. And you'll be able to follow the orders of the spiritual master, and you'll be able to simply understand what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done. Because Krishna says that he's within the heart, right? Dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamu upayanti te. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that for one who's completely surrendered unto him. Do you know the beginning of that verse? Dadami buddhi yogam. Tesham satatam yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam. There we go. Bhajatam priti purvakam. There Prabhupada makes the effort to make the emphasis on bhajatam priti purvakam. Purvakam priti. Completely priti, in love, or completely favorable or pleasurable for Krishna. For them, Krishna within the heart gives direct intelligence. So therefore we need to, of course that doesn't mean that he doesn't give as spiritual master. He gives both ways. Him giving as a spiritual master instruction and him giving within the heart, they're the same thing. It's non-different because he's just externally represented because we're so full, we're so muda that we can't hear within. That's all. But it's the same instruction. So it's not that we get to a stage of devotional service where we kick the guru. Like Prabhupada was in Mayapur. And in Mayapur at that time there was heaps of paddy fields. And the way paddy fields are made is that there are different levels according to the crops. Right? So sometimes you have to go up a little, sometimes you have to go down a little. Like for example, rice crops, you have to go down a little. And other crops, sometimes you have to go up a little. So then what happened was that they were walking, morning walk, and Prabhupada was with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Jayapataka Maharaj, Bhavananda Prabhu and other disciples. And as they were going up a certain level. So Prabhupada needed help to get up. So then Bhavananda Prabhu got to the top, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj was at the bottom. And they were helping Prabhupada up. And Prabhupada got to the top, and as soon as Prabhupada got to the top, he kicked Bhavananda Prabhu down. He said, now I have become purified, liberated, I don't need Guru. So he was teaching by example that this is the Mayavadi tendency. It's a Mayavadi tendency. It is not the tendency of a Mayavadi or an impersonalist. It's our tendency, the Mayavadi within, so to speak. Like, I think it was Mukunda Maharaj, I think he was mentioning that one time they were sitting 26th Avenue and Prabhupada was just going heavy, just chastising Mayavadis and everything. One of the boys there at the time told, they were talking, man, these Mayavadis, these guys must have really roughed up the Swami in India or something, And then after some time they realized that actually Prabhupada was chastising the Mayavadi tendency within. Right? It wasn't just some group in India. Actually it's the tendency, or impersonalistic tendency within, the worst vicious tendency within the heart. So Prabhupada was teaching Bhavananda Prabhu this, that it's not that you get to the highest level or get to a particular level in your spiritual realization, then you just kick Guru, I don't need him, I can do whatever I like now. A subtle version of that is when one performs devotional service, and this is a very common mistake we as neophyte devotees perform. That we chant Hare Krishna, we come to devotional service completely, burned, completely fried by material nature. We come into devotional service, we take to chanting holy name like a thirsty animal comes to an oasis, and we chant Hare Krishna. And then over a period of time, our life changes, our experience changes, our anxiety goes, we become more peaceful and happy. And then we think that, we got everything under control, and then we try to enjoy Maya that way. A big mistake. Big mistake. Because what happens is that at that time, you force Krishna to then teach you, or Maya to teach you through the school of hard knocks. So then you start thinking, I'm chanting Hare Krishna, I'm performing devotional service, but I'm still suffering in material existence. Why is that? Why do I still have anxiety? Why do I still suffer in material? Of course, if you mix and match, you'll get the best and worst of both. It's just common sense. So, the Mayavadi tendency there is that you think that you're so advanced that you don't need to perform devotional service. You become proud. That pride enters the heart. So we need to be careful of that. When we perform devotional service, I don't know if many of you remember, I remember that feeling of renunciation. Like Ainja Prabhu was mentioning, I remember reading one, I think his name was Stephen Rosen, Satyaraj Prabhu. He had written an article on how Ainja Prabhu came to Krishna consciousness. And then Ainja Prabhu was mentioning that when he came to Krishna consciousness, that he had all these instruments with him. And then he read Prabhupada's books with a dictionary, because he didn't know most of the words. And he picked up everything. And then once he realized devotional service was what he wanted to do and join the temple, he gave away all his possessions, including his musical instruments, his guitar and things, and joined the temple. And then he says that later on I realized that I didn't realize the principle of being able to engage all of these things in Krishna service. I just thought everything is mine, I just give it up and join. Have you all experienced that sort of thing before? That, it's just mine, just practice Krishna consciousness like that. Then over a period of time we realize, okay, this is what can be used, this was what should not be used, or I have this, should I use it, should I not use it, maybe I should get some guidance. So gradually we come to the platform of Yukta Vairagya, being able to use everything in Krishna's service. But if you remember that consciousness we had when we were a bit, quote unquote, fanatical in our renunciation of material existence, you can feel that intensity we had, that desire to perform Krishna consciousness for the sake of performing Krishna consciousness, because it was giving us so much pleasure. That's what we need to cultivate throughout our life. Prabhupada's saying, I think you can read this in Lilamrit. It's definitely there in Hare Krishna Explosion. Prabhupada's saying, no, it's definitely in Lilamrit. He's saying that to the first initiates, just before they get initiated, he's telling them that the pitfall of all devotees once they become initiated is that they think they can relax now. I'm initiated, my path back to Godhead is fixed, now let's just take it easy. Whether this life, next life, billion lives, I'm going back to Godhead. My Guru Maharaj will pull me back, right? But Prabhupada's saying, no, actually it's just the beginning. You need to endeavor even more harder after that. Why? Because we want to please the spiritual master, we want to please Krishna. And that's the purpose. Again, coming back to the point I was making in the beginning of the class. Kardama Muni didn't give up household life just for the sake of it. His household life was Krishna conscious. He had a wife that was dedicated to him and performing Krishna conscious activities, facilitating his devotional service, and he in turn was facilitating her devotional service. They had children in Krishna consciousness. Everything was well and good. But Kardama Muni is teaching by example how to progressively perform devotional service according to the Varnashram Dharma system. But more specifically, he was teaching that he was ready to do whatever required in devotional service for the pleasure of Krishna, not simply for his own pleasure. So you will read this later on, and I'll spoil it for you, that Kardama Muni stays back for Devahuti's sake and gives her a son, Kapiladev. But then Kardama Muni leaves. And you may think, why is he going to the forest to search for Krishna when Krishna's right there as Kapiladev? It's mentioned there specifically that Kardama Muni was not so irresponsible. Kardama Muni was not so illogical and unintelligent, right? He was so pure that the Supreme Personality of God had appeared before him 2 times, 3 times as his spiritual master, so many times, as a spiritual master, as himself Lord Vishnu, as Swayambhuv Manu, as a Mahajan, as Kapiladev. He appeared so many times to Kardama Muni. But Kardama Muni left home because it's mentioned Prabhupada. It's a small point, and it's most likely made by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that Kardama Muni's rasa with the Supreme Personality of Godhead was not of Vatsalya ras. His rasa was more to do with dasya and neutrality, shanta. So if he had stayed at home, then his duty would have been to chastise and take care of his son. But that would have been rasa bas, so he left home. Because he knew what would please the Lord in his relationship with the Lord, in what rasa. So he left home, so he can cultivate that rasa and give Krishna pleasure that way. So that's the reason why he left the second time. But the first time he's leaving, of course, you have to make sure is that he was not irresponsible. I remember one time, a long time ago, one of the Prabhus I was talking to, And he was mentioning that back in his country, that he had heard a story that a particular person, he had a family, and he was, getting to a point where he was getting anxious and so much difficulties in life that rather than trying to solve the problem, he decided that, I'll just give it up and I'll take sannyas. So he left his young family, took sannyas, and he lived for a couple of years in the forest. And then after some time, of course, what do you expect? Artificially or prematurely taking up the renounced order is not good, because then one hasn't conquered the desires in the heart. So he came back. And when he came back, then his family members kicked him out, saying, you just left suddenly like this, without no notice, irresponsibly. And so he was kicked out and left on the street. So it's not that we should take up devotional service irresponsibly, but rather we should take it with proper guidance. So with this proper guidance, we'll be able to know what to do and what not to do. Sometimes someone staying in devotional service is better for staying in household life is better for the devotional service. Sometimes someone needs to stay in the various ashrams because it's better for the devotional service. That the spiritual master knows, because they are tattvadarshi. They can see the truth. They can see how it will benefit you now and in the future. Not just, now, but also how it will benefit you in the future. So we need to understand that hindsight is always 20/20 vision, right? When we always look back, we always say, I could have done it this way, I could have done it that way. The spiritual master is able to see that, not just now, but into the future as well. So we need to have that faith and that trust and take shelter in the spiritual master in that way. So that's one point I wanted to make about today's purport, is that Prabhupada's making the point that Kardama Muni knew very clearly what the aim of life was. And he performed his duties responsibly, because he gave a son to Devahuti. That son was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That son was able to liberate his wife and give her protection. So therefore he was qualified to leave home. He also made a point in the beginning, and he had also met the Supreme Personality of Godhead and got his blessings in there as well, that point in time as well. So Kardama Muni is in the full right here. Now the second thing I wanted to mention, it's just a quick one, is that, actually it's in relation to I'll give you the first, in relationship to this point, Kardama Muni was so advanced that although he had performed mystic powers and he was fully absorbed in his household life, he was able to leave. That is the qualification or the potency of Kardama Muni. So that's just a quick point. But the second point I wanted to make was that his wife he enjoyed his wife in the company of beautiful girls. Begetting children was finished, and now he was leaving home. Seeing her husband about to leave, Devahuti was very disturbed, but to satisfy her husband, she was smiling. So we see Kardama Muni's attachment to Krishna consciousness. This is Devahuti's attachment to Krishna consciousness. It's mentioned that when a Kshatriya leaves for a battle, the wife makes sure she doesn't cry. Because the only time a Kshatrani or the wife of a Kshatriya cries is when the body comes back from the battlefield. So in order to send her husband off very peacefully, although she may be anxious, ridden with anxiety, she'll still show a happy face, just for his pleasure, to enthuse him to go on to his battlefield. So here Devahuti is exemplifying that mood. And is it just the women that do it? No, the men also do that as well. Because this is something of devotional service, that we are encouraging one another to practice Krishna consciousness. And if you see this in the transcendental realm, because this is just simply a reflection of the spiritual world, we see that in Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. How externally he acted and how internally he was satisfied. There are so many cases in Chaitanya Charitamrita where he would show external anger, but internally he was peaceful and satisfied. Here's an example. One particular point in time, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was standing with his disciples and associates in a building. And outside, all of these pilgrims from Bengal had come. Right? And all of Jagannath Puri's residents were there. And they're all chanting outside Sri Krishna Chaitanya. And so in the inner chambers of this particular building, at that time, or I think it was in a particular different instance, that when the devotees would address Mahaprabhu as the Supreme Lord, he would immediately shut his ears and start chanting, Vishnu, Vishnu, Vishnu. What are you trying to do? You're trying to send me to the hellish planetary systems? Why are you insistent on performing such blasphemy? So Mahaprabhu would be very, very, very particular. He would chastise. But then in this particular instance, Mahaprabhu hears that all of these people have come to see him. He goes out and everyone starts chanting Mahaprabhu's names and worshipping him like a Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? And so then what Srivas Thakur says? Just see the duplicity of our personality, Supreme Personality of Godhead. That he doesn't allow us to worship him as the Lord, but see here. And Mahaprabhu immediately became shy, embarrassed. But the point I wanted to make was before that, he showed anger, chastising his disciples. But it's mentioned internally he was pleased and satisfied. So Mahaprabhu performed activities like that to teach an example to the world. And how we would know what his internal characteristics would be is by the mercy of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. But yeah, I just wanted, it's a very small point, that's why I've mentioned at the end of the class that Devahuti did this. It's not duplicity. She's utilizing it for the sake of her Krishna consciousness. It's not a duplicitous sort of situation where she's externally something and internally something. No, she's going through the proper etiquette, the proper culture in trying to present to her husband something that she could get him to satisfy, because she missed the opportunity for his association in terms of spiritual realization. So we'll read Devahuti's entreaty to Kardama Muni and how Kardama Muni obliges to Devahuti. Okay, so we just quickly talked about Varnashram Dharma. We talked about the nature of the conditioned soul gradually elevating himself or herself through Varnashram Dharma and the system of the Vedic literature or the Vedic process to come to the platform of devotional service. But by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we've been able to practice devotional service regardless of what situation we are in. This is the mercy of Mahaprabhu. Then we talked a little bit about how the platforms of devotional service and how one should be ready to let go of everything and perform devotional service as exemplified by the gopis of Vrindavan. And then finally we talked a bit about how we need proper guidance and how Devahuti was following proper culture and Devahuti was eager for the association of Kardama Muni. So I'll end here. If there are any comments or questions, we can take one, two. Yes, Prabhu.
I'm just looking at that point you were making about utilizing material things in Krishna consciousness. So when I was in Vrindavan, Gargi Muni gave the example about how he gave Prabhupada a dictaphone. So prior to that, Prabhupada was using a typewriter and he was typing very slowly. And so Gargi Muni gave him the dictaphone. And then so much so, if you read Upadesh Amrita, a Nectar of Instruction, Prabhupada says, that's what we do as devotees. We utilize things in Krishna's service. Like a materialist or a businessman who needs a dictaphone to make money.
Yep.
But devotees can utilize these things in Krishna's service. So if you go to Prabhupada's house now to
dictaphone is still there.
Same one
Yep.
that Prabhupada up until the time of his disappearance was still speaking into that same dictaphone.
Jai.
So that's the whole thing in Krishna consciousness about utilizing things for Krishna's service. Even though for a materialist wouldn't ever think of that. They think, oh, how can I make money from that? I can record my own voice, I can make someone type it out. But for the devotee can utilize the same thing in Krishna's service.
Yep. And you reminded me of how Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, actually he was the most criticized for this, that he would have a car as a sannyasi, he would dress as in a coat and suit as a sannyasi, he'd have furniture, all of these things he would have. In fact, he sent his disciples overseas by airplane, when generally sannyasis just use their feet and remain simple. And simple means, in the sense of wearing the traditional clothes and follow that particular restrictions. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, even his father Bhakti Vinod Thakur, used his position as a magistrate to expound and expand devotional service. So yeah, Prabhupada was following the lines of the previous acharyas, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur exemplified it. It was more obvious in Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and in Srila Prabhupada how we need to use everything in Krishna's service. It's always there, but it was obviously done by them to set an example for the rest of the world. So yeah, thank you for that point. It's very important. Hare Krishna. Yes, Mataji. I don't know. I have no idea. Yeah. you can understand that Devahuti and Kardama Muni are eternal father and mother of Kapila Dev. So you can understand that they're Nityasiddhas as well from that perspective. In one sense, Kardama Muni, Devahuti, you see, what's their name? Kasyapa, Diti. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Yeah, but anyway, they're all parents. The point I wanted to make was that although Diti and Kasyapa, they had those demons as a son. Their son was Vamandev, not Vamandev. Was it Vamandev? No, that was Aditi and Kasyapa. Vamandev, yeah. And then you have the case of later on. You have Prishni and Sutapa. You have that whole thing going. So they're eternal mother and father of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yeah. Okay, we'll end here. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nithai Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bol.